Hey, good day, fellow deal makers. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to have a conversation about international real estate deals, about the frontier and emerging markets, and all sorts of cool stuff straight out of Switzerland right now on the phone with Ladislas. Is that your name? Did I say it right?
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Yes. But so my brain doesn't completely hotwire and fry, we're going to call him Maurice on the show. That's what most people call you. Is that right?
Correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks for coming on the show, man. So who are you and what do you do?
Yeah. So a little bit of background. So essentially, I run a blog and vlog that's been growing very fast that focuses on international real estate, specifically in emerging and frontier markets, as well as helping people obtain second residencies, typically in also emerging markets, but with low taxes. So just as a bit of background, usual background, went to college in Canada, studied business, went to grad school in Australia, law school there, and then I got a job. Like most people out of university, I got a job for Nestlé, the big food company in Switzerland. And then they sent me to Africa for 7 years. So I lived in South Africa for a few years and then in Ghana in West Africa. So my last role there was being in charge of I was on the executive board of Nestlé Ghana, running the milk business for a few West African countries. So I spent most of my 20s in Africa, actually. And then when I turned 30, I thought, cool. So I did this. That was that one phase of my life. Now I want to go traveling for a little bit. And then I'll just go get another job in Dubai or something. And so I quit. And then I went on a road trip with some family members. We drove from Oman in the Middle East, so it's close to Dubai, all the way to Paris, so by car. And so we went through all of Iran, Armenia, Georgia, Turkey, all of Eastern Europe, and then found our way and then made our way to Paris. And for the first time in a very long time, I had time for myself. I had time to think. Because when you're in the rat race, you're working 60, 70 hours a week. There's always that presentation you're working on. There are these targets, et cetera, et cetera. And you don't have time to think about not only your life in general, but also mostly about your own personal finances. And traveling through all these countries, I just saw so many opportunities. I would arrive in a city and I would go see real estate agents, I'd go see lawyers, I'd look at the property market and I'd be like, wow, like prime real estate is this cheap in this capital city. This doesn't quite make sense. And then I'd see that there are like a few catalysts from an economic point of view. So along the way, I started doing some deals. Um, and I kept pushing back my return to work because I do flips like in Montenegro, for example. I'd be buying an apartment, I'd be renovating it, and I'd be flipping it. Would work well, and then I'd find another apartment, then I'd be doing two apartments at the same time, and I just kept pushing that timeline back. And at some point, my friends were just asking me because I'd post on Facebook when it was still a thing, and
Yeah.
and my friends were like, "Hey, Ladislas, you're Maurice. We see you in like all these weird countries, and it's been a few years now, but you don't seem to have a job. Like, what do you do?" So then I started this blog where I would just kind of document my research. It was part of my process. I was like, before entering a market, let me just put the thesis down and think about it. Just write it down. And then the blog started working, and then eventually I started a YouTube channel, and now that's doing pretty well too. So it's been quite a few years now that I'm doing this full time. So I'm now a full time investor.
And your name of your blog and your kind of your brand name. Why don't you share that?
The wandering investor.
The wandering investor. There's a saying, not all that wanders, not all who wanders are lost, right?
Correct.
Now,
Correct. Yeah.
while you're wandering, right? Because you're like, okay, I did Nestle, I did, corporate, not corporate America, but corporate living, and you were 60 hours a week hustling and bustling. And you're like, okay, I'm going to exit this. I'm going to take some time and then I'll go back to corporate, right? Like
Yeah.
rejuvenate. In that process, did you feel lost? Like you quit. You didn't have anything you were like, you didn't have a job lined up or anything like that. You just like, I'm done.
Yeah, it was a bit much. It's hard to leave a good job and good career.
Yeah.
Um, but man, you live only once, you know, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, if I don't go traveling when I'm in my 20s and 30s, like when am I going to do it when I'm like 60 and I have like physical issues?
Yeah.
Uh, you know, so I just went for it and I was pretty confident I could get another job. And now I don't think I'm employable anymore. Anyone that looks at my resume, a dude called the wandering investor that hasn't had a job in like 5 years, I'm just not employable anymore.
Yeah.
So that ship has sailed. So now I need to make it work.
Yeah. The ship has sailed and you burnt the ships, right? You're like, I'm the wandering investor. When you take on a brand name like that, yeah, you become unemployable pretty quick, right? Um, when that happened, what friends and family were like, okay, what's the plan, right? Law school, you've done all this stuff, you built the resume, you climbed the corporate ladder to the top. What about health insurance? What about this and that? What kind of questions were people throwing at you, and how
You
what
know,
was going on in your mind?
like most of my family, from my parents, just didn't even ask any questions. The reality is that most people are not interested in what you do if what you do is so far out of their reality.
Yeah.
So I'd come back from, or I'd just go visit them, and they'd be like, "Oh, where were you?" I was like, "Oh, I was for 2 months in Ukraine, you know, before the war." They wouldn't even ask me, "Oh, how was it?" Like nothing. They'd just be like, "Oh, well, you know, your cousin did this, that." Most people are just not interested in what you do. Like that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, does not compute, does not, and they're like, all right, let's not even talk about it because they don't
Yeah.
understand. So you're traveling around and you start finding these pockets of emerging markets or good deals that you could get involved in. You started blogging about it and sharing that. Now,
Mhm.
what inspired you to blog and share the story and the journey of it?
I like to write, and it's part of my process. It it's easy to have a thesis in your mind, right?
Yeah.
But until you put it in writing in front of other people, that's the real test. When people, you know, come back to you and say your thesis blows, you know, so it forces you to really think the thesis through. So that's really got me to do this.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I have tons of idea, right? I'm a visionary guy, and I built some companies, and I've had a lot of at bats, and I've had some successes, and but a lot more failures, right? And in the process of, when I first got my start, I would have an idea, and I would go into my room and I'd build it out. And then as I got more experience in venture capital and building companies, I learned that as soon as I have an idea, get it on paper, share it with the world as fast as quickly possible, and see what kind of feedback. And then I'd even put a price tag on it, and I'd try to sell it before even development happened. But there's something real that happens when people start reading it and they say that's a terrible idea. You go, like, but I'd rather do that early on than later on. So you built this as a part of your process. Hey, these are the ideas. This is what I'm working on. What did you hear back from the community as you were doing this?
A bit of everything, mostly positive, because what I do is actually unique. No one else does this. Like someone who travels full time, going into emerging and frontier markets, and I'm talking like places like Serbia, you know, Montenegro, Colombia, Kenya, Uzbekistan, like those are Turkey, like those are the type of places I do business. So there's absolutely no one who's going there, like writing about these topics just
Yeah.
on the ground, because these countries are typically very data poor. So even if you Google, there isn't much information because there's just very little data.
Yeah. Now, it might be just the way the screen is, but you look tall. Are you like how tall are you? Do you stand out like a green thumb when you're walking through when you're
Yeah,
walking through like Africa or like Saudi Arabia?
yeah.
Because it kind of give us an idea of what is that like traveling, and maybe describe for people who are just listening, what that looks like if you're walking through a town in Kenya.
I mean, everyone looks at you. You just get used to it, you know. That's, I mean, you know.
Who is that guy, right? And what is he doing
Yeah,
here, dude? And then people come up to you and they ask you a bunch of like, "Hey, what are you doing here? What do you do?"
yeah,
And
yeah, or not. Like, or sometimes people are just not interested, you know. People have their own lives,
yeah,
often tough in these markets, you know, so
yeah,
they're not, they might be curious, but they might also not be interested. I mean, life is hard. I go into these countries, people earn $150 a month. They struggle to pay the rent. They struggle to feed themselves and their
Mhm.
families. So some tall white guy walking by, it's like, okay, like, so what? Like I've got to, you know, put food on the table tonight. So there's a bit of everything.
Yeah. You know what?
What you don't want is the attention of cops, though, because in these countries, cops, when they get interested in your case, that's not good.
Yeah, then it costs some money, right? Um, it just seems, I've interviewed quite a few people, but it seems like you have a strong sense of empathy. But you're also an attorney, right? You also went to law school, and you're a deal guy. Like, understand. Let us peer inside your brain when you're looking at a new area. What are you thinking about? Because it sounds like you're thinking about the people, the areas, that this and that. Kind of like give us a peer into what goes on in your brain.
Cool. So in my head, there's a map of the world,
Okay.
always with all its moving parts and a whole bunch of macro variables. And then I look at trends and I try to see, cool, how can I play these trends? So ultimately, I'm more of a macro guy.
Hmm.
So for example, if we're heading into a food and energy crisis, right? If that's going to happen, then I would probably want to invest in countries that are energy independent and food independent, right? So my mind would go potentially at this point in time to places like Paraguay or Brazil. Then I would kind of dig more and see, cool, what other macro trends are either tailwinds or headwinds. So, I look at Brazil, natural resources, fantastic, a lot of issues on the ground, but that's nothing new. Presidential elections coming up with potentially a socialist coming to power, not so good. What are the prices of assets? How are they historically? How do they compare to neighbors, to their peers? Um, what's access to credit like, etc. And if I feel that there's like an interesting picture, then I'll just fly there and stay there for, a month, 2 months, 3 months on the ground. And then I'll try to confirm whether it's a good play or not. And then how do I play it? Right? Because sometimes there are different ways to play a macro theme in a certain country. So I'll give you an example. 2.5 years ago, I went to Uzbekistan. So Uzbekistan is a country between Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, and Kyrgyzstan. So right in the stands right there in Central Asia. And the country had been under some brutal dictatorship since forever. Essentially, like after the Soviet Union, just the local communist guy just stayed in power and just was just brutal. And then he died in I think 2017 or so. And a new guy came over. Everyone thought he'd be this crazy dictator as well. But then he started opening up the country completely and pushing through massive reforms and removing capital controls, welcoming foreign investment, etc. The population is young, educated, booming. There's good infrastructure. The country, because it was self-sufficient, has a lot of local industry, a lot of agriculture, a lot of copper, gold, uranium, etc. So gas. So and it's right at the center of Eurasia, which is, if you're the opinion that the economic power is gradually shifting from the North Atlantic to more to the east, then a country that is at the center of what used to be the Silk Road is probably interesting, especially when it's got all these other tailwinds. Um, so I was like, cool, I should probably go buy an apartment there in Tashkent, the capital city. So I took a plane and I got there, I looked at real estate. It was a very decent deal. Trying to structure a purchase was a bit of a gray zone. Foreigners are not allowed to, but if you create a company, you can, but you can't rent it out, but no one really checks if you do so or not. So a bit of a gray zone. And then I looked at the local stock market. Uzbekistan has a stock market, and these companies were cheap. So companies with P ratios of like 3, um, with dividend yields of 20% that were growing 40% a year. And I was like,
Wow.
what? Yeah, exactly.
Like
But
tech
very
companies?
illiquid, like cement companies,
Yeah.
the local commodities exchange, local banks, some local like glass manufacturer, just like all these like very random businesses. and but very illiquid. And all the information is either in Russian or in Uzbek. So I went to see a broker there, sat down with the guy. He explained the stuff to me. I had to look at the numbers, and I was like, gosh, this is ridiculous. And the government had only recently removed all capital controls. So you could buy stocks in Uzbekistan and then sell them and repatriate the money. Because before those returns, you could buy stocks, you could sell them, but then your money was stuck in Uzbekistan and you can get the money out. So I was like, wow. So I went to Uzbekistan hoping to buy an apartment. I came back with a brokerage account.
Did that
And
allow
instead of,
you to own real estate then?
I didn't buy real estate. I just bought a whole bunch of local companies on the stock exchange. And I did a 3x in like a bit over 2 years, but
Did
in what was ultimately very safe because those businesses were sound.
Were you like exploring like taking over the companies, like buying the majority, like like Elon just did with Twitter? Were you looking at that kind of stuff, or just becoming an investor in these?
Yeah, I discussed with some VC guys that were based out of Switzerland. But honestly, I didn't quite feel like committing 5 years of my life to turning around a vegetable oil factory in Western Uzbekistan.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Now, as you're traveling, right? Do you have home base? Do you have a place where you call home, where you have like a couch, or like a desk and such like that?
it's going to be a little sad what I'm going to say, but yeah, it's Ukraine.
Okay.
And I had to go. So because of the whole situation, I had to
Oh,
leave. So now I'm just traveling a lot.
no kidding. All right, so you had a home in Ukraine, but because of what's going on in the world, at the time of this recording, May 9th, 2022, so you had to pack up and go. But you've been already doing this, already been on the road for the past 5 years. So this is
Yeah,
nothing new to you.
no, it's nothing new.
You had a head start. Now, a lot of people got displaced and they did not have experience in travel or setting up companies or investing. Like, do you find that you're being a resource for people who are being displaced?
I mean, I took on a bunch of people in some of my apartments and houses that were empty, yeah,
Wow. Okay.
temporarily. But I mean, whatever. They moved on. It was just for a few weeks.
Yeah. All right. So as you're traveling, you look macroeconomics, right? You're looking at the big picture. You got this inside your brain. You see this revolving globe. Oh, by the way, is a globe flat or is it a globe? No, I'm just kidding. We
I don't
don't need to
know.
talk about flat
You tell
earthers.
me. You tell me.
I have no freaking clue. I have no clue.
You
Nothing
should
is real.
you should go on BitChute and watch those videos. It's good entertainment.
Okay, send me one of those links after this. I was, you know how you could go down the rabbit hole of
Oh
watching
yeah.
YouTube, and I just started watching. I listen. I have no skin in the game. I don't care. I just want to know both sides of the coin, and I want a fun argument to be had. But it's hilarious, because I just have no clue. I'm ignorant of most things in this world other than me and my small little family and my couple businesses that I run. But all right, so you got this picture of a world in your head, and you see uh, whether it's flat or round, it doesn't matter. And you see political stuff, you see cost of goods, and you see these moving pieces. So it gives you a grand picture of the world, and then you just find a place of interest and you say, okay, I'm going to commit 3 months there. I'm going to land there and look for either real estate, technologies, or companies or whatever to get involved with. And then you share that through your blog and your YouTube. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Now, what fears do you have? Right. So, for me, I've got, traveling to a new area, I'm thinking like safety. I'm thinking like, is my money going to be protected? Is everybody going to play rules? Am I going to get kidnapped? Is my money safe? If I buy something, could they just like, I have a buddy who bought an island and then he ran into some issues and they had to like remove it from him and stuff like crazy stuff that could happen internationally. So I think fear for me in uncertainty keeps me out of other markets, especially emerging or things that are up in like, how do you approach that? I would love to learn from you.
Look, I mean, I've even done deals in African countries a few years after a civil war. Look, at the end of the day, it's generally safe to invest in most places in the world from a property rights point of view if you hire a good lawyer. Do not cheap out when it comes to lawyers. So when I go to a new country, especially emerging or frontier market, and I am trying to structure a deal, I will go to one of the best law firms and I will pay. I'll probably overpay. And people will tell me, oh, like, oh, I have a lawyer, he's cheaper. There's always a cheaper lawyer. But
Mm.
when you're first doing business in a country, you are vulnerable and you need to accept this and you need to take measures. And those measures include taking one of the best lawyers in town.
How do you find the best lawyers? So, okay, you and I, we're going on a trip together. We're going to be like, all right, let's check out Ghana or wherever.
Mhm.
Let's just say you haven't been there before. And we're like, first thing, we need to meet an attorney. This is going to be a fun game. Tell us the stack of people we need to meet, right? Attorney being one of them. And how do we find the best ones in town? How do you
Cool.
approach that?
So the first thing is for the attorneys, generally, actually, the best lists are going through embassy websites. So you go through the embassy website of the US, Canada, Germany, France, Switzerland, etc., of
Okay.
like tier A countries. And they often, but not always, but often, at least one of them will have a list of local law firms. And they're typically the best. So then you get in touch with a few of those and you go meet two or three of them, talk to them, get a feel for them, and then pick one of them.
Okay. So we've got attorneys.
Yeah.
Who else do we want to meet? Like when we're going into a new area, do you do any pre-intelligence of like setting up some relationships prior, or do we just
Yeah.
land?
If I know people, I'll get in touch with them and I'll say, hey, can you introduce me to XYZ? But I also like just going in there kind of raw without people knowing me. Because then you get a really a feel for who they are. So if they know more about you initially than you do about them, it can be it can play against you. So go in there, speak to people. So I'd go approach a few real estate agencies. I would literally just knock at the door, just go meet the team. I would go see a few brokers as well, say, hey, I'm a foreigner, I'm looking to invest. Just say a small sum. Um, if you start saying sums that are too big, then people can want to screw you over. So just say a small sum and then scale it up if you actually wanted to invest more. So
Okay.
don't go in there acting like the big swinging D, trying to show everyone how important you are, because that's just how you're going to attract scams and issues for yourself. So go in there, be humble, um, downplay who you are and how much you have, and take it from there.
All right. What's a good number to throw out that's humble, not the big swinging D, as you would say? What's a good number as you're starting, to say, hey, I'm looking to invest X amount.
Like for example, if you're looking to buy real estate, you say you want to buy a one-bedroom apartment.
So you're not
You know,
throwing out financial number. You're throwing out like
yeah,
I'm looking for a one bedroom apartment.
yeah. If you go for shares with a broker, you want to make sure one that you get a broker that is on the actual website of the stock exchange. So you go to the local stock exchange. Typically, they'll have a list of all the brokers. You choose a few of those. You go see them. You won't have any issues typically. And you say you'll have like whatever, like 10, 20, $30,000, to invest. You want to buy a few shares. And if you want to buy more, then you can do that. So
Okay.
just don't be extravagant.
Got it. Extravagant puts a target on your back for
It
scams
does.
and for danger. What kind of
It does.
in your 5 years of travel, what have you seen the hard way in terms of international investing or travel?
So most of my issues were before I became a full-time investor
Mhm.
because I just didn't have enough time to do proper research. And then I made investments that were, with hindsight, suboptimal. So I would buy real estate that, honestly, I should not have bought. Um, but if I had actually been there for 2 months, doing my due diligence, I would not have made those mistakes. So each time my mistakes were because I just didn't have enough time to do my proper research.
Yeah. Yeah. Out of all the places you traveled, what place is your favorite? What place is your least favorite? Where you're like, I'll never go back to that effing place.
So not talking about investments or anything, just from a pure travel lifestyle. So
Love,
favorite, actually,
yeah.
South Africa is amazing.
Yeah.
From a lifestyle point of view, I would not invest a cent there. but from a lifestyle point of view, it's gorgeous, amazing weather, national parks, good infrastructure, amazing food, etc.
Yeah.
I also love Montenegro in the Balkans, so south of Croatia. Beautiful little country of 600,000 people. Actually, for Americans, it's very easy to obtain residency there. It's one of the easiest ways to get to live in Europe. It's in Montenegro. I've been helping a lot of people get residency there. There's some beautiful real estate. Um, the sea there, it's on the Adriatic Sea, so it's just stunning, beautiful national parks. You know, in winter you can be skiing, and then an hour and a half later you're in a shirt, drinking Italian coffee, just in front of a stone house and like super yachts. It's
Wow.
And the coffee is $1.10, you know. It's
Yeah.
like, so that I really like. I spend pretty much every summer there. The country I like the least, I'd say countries that were very nice before, but that just went downhill. Um, so I can think of, for example, Germany, um, you know, Canada, Australia, just they were great countries, but the social dynamics between people and government have just reached levels where it's just not pleasant anymore. You don't really feel free anymore.
Yeah.
So those are places I just tend to not really go back to.
Yeah. I hear that. You talk about residency, citizenship, right? So being an international traveler, the wandering investor, right? So you're going to these places, and then people reach out, like maybe like me, or maybe people who have sold a company and they've got some money coming in, and they're going, "Hey, let's have some fun. Let's go someplace or lower tax burdens or whatever." What reasons? Like, what are some of the main reasons people would reach out to you and go, "Hey, I'm exploring living outside of the U.S.," for example?
So for a few reasons. One, for example, a lot of Americans want to, or Canadians or Australians want to diversify. So they made a bunch of money in the US. And at the end of the day, for example, like the US is one of the best countries in the world to make money. Um, the capital markets are just so thick and liquid, and just there's so much money flowing around, much more than in Europe. But at some point, people are just like, I want to diversify. I don't want to have all of my eggs in this one basket. So I would like to have real estate in other countries. And then the question people reach out to me, and it's like, which countries, and then we discuss the risk profile of the person, what they're really looking for. Is it a pure investment? Or is it lifestyle? Then what sort of lifestyle are they looking for? Do they want a plan B as well? Because sometimes if you buy real estate, you can get residency out of it. So if you needed to leave for whatever reason, you have your plan B for yourself and your family. In some markets, in Turkey, for example, if you invest $400,000 of real estate in Turkey, you get citizenship for you and your family. So you buy a few apartments, and Turkey is vast. I mean, there's Istanbul, a city of 15 million people. It's been one of the core historical cities. Istanbul's always been there. Um, the crossroads of history, always. And the coast on the Mediterranean coast, etc. You can buy real estate anywhere, $400,000. 9 months later, you, your spouse, and your underage children all get a Turkish passport that
Mm.
then goes down the generations. So you not only get cheap real estate, you get um, generally very nice real estate in a beautiful location in a history rich country, which is a very different vibe to the US, where everything's newer, etc. So when you know go away for 2-3 weeks, you really feel that you're somewhere very different, and then you're making a generational move for not just your children, but your future grandchildren and great grandchildren, etc. They're all going to be Turkish.
Hmm. Now, I'm American. I live in the U.S., and even better, I live in Florida, right? So, like right now, we have I love Florida right now. It is
Yeah,
amazing.
well
Um,
done.
what's that?
Well done.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So my daughter's 9, and we lived in 9 different homes. We've lived in, Florida, a lot of it, but then we've moved to like Dallas, New York, Orlando, so we've moved around a bunch, but Florida by far has been my favorite place to live. But shout outs to all my friends in other places, but I love Florida, if you can't tell. As you're traveling around and you're looking at places in your wandering investor world, do you think you'll ever go home flag? This is where I'll always be.
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, honestly, I don't know. I don't think so because I've just been traveling so much my whole life. I've been close to 100 countries and I lived in, I think, 12 or 13 countries.
Hmm.
So I've been around a lot. So just staying in one place and saying I'm gonna be married to this place is it sounds very foreign to me.
That's so cool. How many languages do you speak?
Four.
Four? Which ones are those?
French, English, German, Russian.
No kidding. Super cool. Has any government agencies tried to scoop you up based on, or are you working? Well, you probably couldn't tell me if you're working with a
Yeah.
government agent. Yeah, Josh, I'm with the CIA. Yeah, sorry about that
Yeah,
dumb
like
question.
and I'm all over YouTube.
Yeah, true. Hey, that's a great cover. That's
All right.
He's a superstar. Um, no, but like as you're traveling and you're working with these groups, you've got, you went to law school, you've got an incredible history in corporate America, you're building some stuff. Like, how do you know you're winning? How do you know you're on the right path? And what metrics do you measure to see if you might be off in your life plan?
My metric is the level of freedom I have.
Yeah.
It's not even necessarily that financial. Like money is just a means to freedom. That's all it is for me. Because I'll make investments that are a little odd sometimes, but I'm not doing it for the financial rewards. I'm doing it because I get some paperwork that gives me more freedom or access to certain things. Sometimes I'll just outright pay for a residency permit. Pay $10,000 to get permanent residency in a country for the rest of my life. In a continent far away. I get pleasure out of this. Is it a good investment? I don't know. Maybe it won't be. Maybe it will. But I feel a lot more free
Yeah.
because when I need to move, when I need to travel, when I need to go places, I can do it. And during the whole situation with the disease, I was still traveling full time.
Wow.
People couldn't leave their countries. People were blocked, et cetera, et cetera. During this whole period, I was still traveling full time. I was still moving from continent to continent, et cetera, because of all these options I have. It never stopped me.
All right. This is going to be a question based on your experience with Nestle. Your favorite chocolate bar at Nestle?
It's a French one in so mass market. It's called Crunch. Do you have it in the
Yeah,
US?
we have the Nestle Crunch.
Okay, Crunch.
Yeah.
And the Nestle has a the equivalent of Lindt in Switzerland. It's called Cahier. It's like Lindt, but even better.
I don't know what
So
lint
yeah, if you
is,
ever
but
come to Switzerland, get yourself some like Cahier chocolate.
Kaye? All right.
Cahier,
Maybe hey, next time you're there, send, package one up for me. I love
yeah.
Butterfingers. Those are my favorite Nestle. But this show isn't about chocolate, but you just have my mind and my mouth watering for some chocolate. Um, if you could go back, right? You're about to pull the plug at Nestle, right? You've worked your way up. You were on the, all sorts of cool meetings, I'm sure, and you get to have a conversation for yourself now and yourself then. Do you think you guys would get along, by the way? And then what advice might you give your younger self there?
I'd just say do it. I mean, I remember why did I make that decision? I hope my former boss isn't watching this.
Shout
But
out,
it
hey
was it
Bob.
wasn't it was just it wasn't that guy. It was just like,
Yeah.
you know, the guys, like most of them,
Yeah.
they were very unhappy. They were working really hard because when you're at a certain level, you look the level up. You're like, that's what I'm supposed to aspire to. So cool. I'm on the country board. What I'm supposed to aspire for is like regional board. And then I look at the regional board guys, and they're like 7 years older than me. They're all balding. Uh, they're married and they hate their wives, and somehow they're not even doing that well financially because they ended up with gold diggers. And and you're like, is that what I'm supposed to aspire to?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, like no. I'd just say do it. Just do it.
Would you get along with your corporate self?
I think I was a bit of a douche, but after a few beers, I'm pretty sure we get along.
Yeah, right. Once the douche cover has been dropped, then you're in. I get it. Yeah, I look back at my younger self, and I was so arrogant, so ego driven, and sometimes that's what it takes to build a company, but that's not a way to sustain any sort of healthy life or relationship or lifestyle. And if I could look back at my former self, I'd be like, don't be an idiot. And I'd probably hit my younger self. But like, that's from the future, bitch. I don't know. Oh, wow. Wow. We just went on a little rabbit trail there, Mr. Maurice. So as you're working with these groups, how do you make money, right? So you're give us a few of your income streams. You don't have to tell us numbers if you don't want to, or you can. I always like
Oh,
hearing numbers.
so from my own, I've got all my own personal investments, so
Yeah.
rental, flipping, stocks, private placements, venture capital. I invest in like very random businesses. I invested in a chain of chicken stores in Gambia and West Africa. So it's like it's really all over.
Yeah.
Um, and then with regards to my business, a few things. So one, I offer consulting. Two, I make money off some referrals. So when people get in touch with like one of the real estate agents I recommend, I get a percentage of their commission. So it doesn't make it more expensive for people who contact them. I just get a little, just referral fee from the agent.
Yeah.
But what people get out of it is because when you go somewhere, probably 70% of agents just talk shit of real estate agents. They're
Yeah.
just complete nonsense.
Yeah.
20% are like, all right, and one will be good. So when you go through my website, you pretty much have a guarantee that the person will be either all right or good. And so the 7 out of 10 have been
Yeah.
have been like taken out, filtered out,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's free.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's one way I make money.
So, out of all your income sources right now, let's just say a flying asteroid hits your income sources and you can only choose one, but it goes down to zero, but that's the only one you're allowed to invest in for the rest of your life. Which channel would you choose? I know that you looked terrified when I asked you that question. Your eyes
Because
got
it's just
huge.
I can't answer because the what I do is like true diversification. I am invested across asset classes, across jurisdictions, all over the world. So I'll put it this way: at any given point, one of my investments is blowing up. At any given point, because when you're that diversified, there's always something going wrong somewhere.
Yeah.
But I'm always sleeping very well at night because I know that the rest is doing fine, or is a natural hedge to what's
Yeah.
blowing up.
Yeah. You know what I find is some people might look at you and say, man, that is super risky. What you're doing is probably the least risky thing you could do in terms of diversification, not only in asset classes, in geographic, in all sorts of stuff. So you're actually hedging your risk better than most.
I mean, I'll give you an example. I messed up 2 months ago. When Russia started making a move on Ukraine, I didn't think it would be that big of a move, and I bought a bunch of Russian stocks, and
Mm,
now I'm stuck with them. I can't even sell them.
yeah.
Um,
They got
so I was
shut
like,
off from the world.
yeah,
The
yeah.
world just
So
said, we're done with you, Russia. I was like, holy
yeah,
moly.
I clearly made a mistake, but all my oil positions and agricultural positions just shot up. So
Hmm.
I ended up that week, being in the positive, even though I took a massive write off on my Russian stocks.
Yeah. That was some people might call that a failure. That was a great lesson learned, right? Is seeing
Bit of a
that.
failure too. A bit of a failure. A bit of a failure. Yeah.
Before you pulled the trigger on that deal, like you're looking at it and you're like, oh man, like I think that Russian stocks, this or that or whatever. Like, did you have a gut instinct, like maybe I shouldn't do this, and you're like, nah, let's do it.
I guess.
Oh, you went against your gut. Tell
I
us
don't
how.
know. I don't know. I don't know. It's just the numbers were just too good. And like these companies were so cheap. They were just so cheap and gushing cash. They
Yeah.
still are. They still are like Russian companies are gushing cash right now. It's just, I'm not getting it.
You're just cut off from it. You're just seeing it happen. You just don't get to get any of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The holy moly, as a deal maker, right? You're making tons of deals and you're traveling all over. You're gonna make mistakes. My biggest mistakes are either I didn't listen to my wife when I asked like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" or I just didn't tell her, right? So I didn't include my life business partner, or I didn't trust my gut. Those have been the two biggest like things from now on. If it doesn't clear the wife, doesn't clear the gut. The answer is no. How do you make sure that you are staying in in your own guide rails? What are some things that you look for? And I don't
That's a
mean to
good
get too
question.
personal, so you can
Yeah,
remove
yeah.
some of the personal stuff from it. But when it comes to deals,
That's a very good question. I just try to be really hard with myself. I just try to be very hard. And I try to look back at all the mistakes I made because I made
yeah,
many. So each time before I get involved in something, I'm like, okay, those really are all the risks. Am I comfortable with these risks? Because in many cases, look, in some of these countries, look, sure, you buy an apartment, you use a good lawyer, you'll have a good title deed and all good. But sometimes you do like venture capital in countries like this, it's like if things take a bad turn, am I gonna go chase the chicken store owner in Gambia through Gambian courts? No.
no way.
So really the decision is am I comfortable investing with that person? Because ultimately the contract doesn't actually mean anything. The contract is just for clarity between the two parties, but it's not like it's going to be enforced at any given point.
Yeah,
So just being truly aware of the risks that you're taking, because it's easy to go in there, oh, like the contract says, oh, if he like doesn't pay, I get this, I get that. It's like, no, that's not the risk. Like the risk is the accounting's going to be a mess. Like it's just, like you have no control. You actually can't do anything about anything. You're entirely dependent on that guy. And are you comfortable with this? Like ultimately, that's what you're doing. You're just giving money to that dude who will then,
buy chicken
maybe give
coops.
you your money back or not.
Yeah. All right. So you and I are sitting across from the table and we're having coffee, Turkish coffee, right? Awesome. I love that idea. Let's do that, by the way. So we're sitting here having a coffee, and someone comes up and they're asking us for money. And they sit across from us and we're talking. And what are some questions that you ask to sniff out bullshit, right? So they're asking us for 50 grand or 100 grand or something. Like what what are some
I'll,
things you're looking for?
I'll just drill down on the business plan.
Yeah.
Like, give me the numbers. The guy doesn't have the numbers. They don't make sense. He's just bullshitting.
Yeah.
Because again, like in a lot of these markets, the education levels are slightly lower. So you meet less whiz kids in terms of numbers.
Hmm.
It's not like you're meeting some like Harvard MBA that'll just like put all these numbers in front of your face and you won't even really understand and he'll play you that way. But it all makes sense, but then you get played. In those markets, it's more a bit more simple.
Yeah.
So it's a bit easier to sniff people out, I'd say.
Okay. What's one of your favorite questions to ask that maybe aren't that isn't tied to a business model, the financials, or the company? Like what are some questions that you like a question you ask deal makers to kind of gauge
So,
who
for
they are?
example, I'll give you a very local example. In Africa, before I get involved with people, I'll try to meet their priest or their imam or
Mm.
their pastor.
Hey, let's go out for a coffee. Bring your priest. How do you make that happen?
Yeah, yeah,
Really? Just
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
And if they ask why?
They understand why. Because I'm trying to get to know them and their community.
Yeah. And if they say
Because
no,
there's no everyone knows the courts don't mean anything. So you gotta source trust somewhere.
all right.
And these are anchors of society.
So when we go into a new area, we're going to meet a priest, an attorney. This sounds like a joke, man. Like we a priest, an attorney, and so walk into a bar. But that's what you got to gauge out to see.
Depends, yeah. In some circumstances, that's what you need to do, speak to the
Ah,
priest.
it's brilliant. It's super cool because here's the thing. I'm an American. I'm ignorant. Even though I traveled some places in the world, I'm ignorant. Like I'm honest. If I went to a place, I would call you up. I'd be like, "Hey man, can you meet me in wherever I'm going?" Because I have no clue, and I'd rather go with someone who's been there 100 times and who knows the lay of the land. Do you do that? Do you do like private business tours where I want to go buy a company or something like that, or me and my group or whatever?
No,
Why not?
I mean, because this blog I'm doing is part-time really.
Yeah.
My main focus and my main income is my own money. So
Ah,
I can't, and honestly, there isn't that much money in showing businesses to people in these markets because it's like the fee, which is not typically not be that interesting.
ah,
It's a lot of work to find good businesses in these
it's a
countries.
lot of work, man.
A
We
lot of
look at it a
work.
lot of. It's a lot of work to find something good. Um,
Yeah. And the accounting, the auditing is very poor because you can bribe auditors
ah,
easily.
freaking, freaking
Yeah.
accountants, you guys. Get the numbers right. Um, so what's a big goal that you have for your life? How old are you? Are you allowed to say that?
Yeah, 35.
35. All right, 35-year-old dude. What's a big goal? Big life goal that you're like, man, if I hit this, I'm gonna buy a new shirt.
I don't think I've even asked myself this question, to be honest with you. I mean, I just want my children to grow, be healthy and free. I just want to maximize freedom. That's all I really
Maximize.
want. I just want to be free.
So freedom, super important to you. Like we had a little blip in the internet here. Like I said, what is the big thing? And you said the my big thing is freedom for me and my family.
Freedom for me and my family in a world in which freedom is under attack everywhere.
Yeah. Do you this is going to be a question offline. Dang it. I wish I'm going for it. All right. When you when you look in these areas that freedom is being attacked, right? Are you looking for like do you automatically just start moving your investments away from that or do you look
No,
at how do you measure whether to keep my money into a place or yank it out?
look, the personal freedoms can be under attack somewhere, but it
Yeah.
can still be a good investment.
Mm. You keep them
You know,
separate, huh?
yeah, like ideally, you live in a country where you don't really have assets. That's true freedom. If you start having issues with the government, you're gone. You're just gone. And then it becomes like expensive and complicated to try to seize assets in different jurisdictions. That's true freedom. Is where you live, you actually don't really have anything. That's true freedom.
But that doesn't play into our ego and our pride, like the big house, the cars, the boats, right? My name up on that wall.
No, you go play somewhere else.
So your true idea of success and freedom is being able to live in a place where if your freedom starts to get stepped on, you're like, peace, I'm out, and
Yeah.
you can move within a day, right? It's gone.
I mean, a bit, yeah, I need a bit more time, but yeah, like essentially I can just go for sure,
Yeah. When
for
you
sure.
travel, how many bags do you typically like? What are some
Carry
go
on,
to? Really?
carry on. That's it.
You're gonna be somewhere for 3 months and you just do a carry on?
Yeah.
Man, I do an overnight trip. Well, I've got
You'll see you'll see a lot of the same shirts on my YouTube videos.
awesome, man. Awesome, super cool. What is so give us a few tips on traveling as the wandering, investor. I work with a lot of wandering entrepreneurs and what do they call them? Digital nomads, right? So I've got a buddy right now in Costa Rica. He goes to a place, he buys a motorcycle, a surfboard, and a tent. Like that's his
Awesome.
way. Yeah, he
That's
loves it.
cool.
Um,
I say don't plan too much
yeah, have fun.
because if you're planning too much, it means just kind of reading what's online and reading what books say and recommendations and TripAdvisor says.
Yeah,
Rather, just go with the flow. Go with the flow,
yeah.
and then you'll really follow your what you really want to do.
That's super cool. Super cool. What's a place that you haven't gone to that you want to go to?
Argentina.
Mm, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
We mentioned coffee, right? Turkish coffee. We could have some. Like, what is your favorite? Like, I would say ethnic, but nothing's ethnic to you because you go everywhere, right? But what's a place like? What's your favorite food or drink or something when you travel? You're like, I gotta stop here, see this guy here or gal, and I get this drink or food.
You're gonna like this answer.
Oh God, I hope so. Let's do it.
McDonald's.
What? No, that's a terrible. Really?
Yeah, because like when you're always traveling, sometimes you're just happy to have that one anchor, that doesn't change. Like a Big Mac is a Big Mac, everyone everywhere in the world. And sometimes the first like 3 days of being, or first day of being in like a new country, you took a long haul flight, your immune system, you're a bit tired, etc. You don't want to go straight to eating like spicy tacos or whatever. You're just happy to just have a burger like back home,
Really?
you know.
No, burgers are not the same. You can't get a Big Mac in India or something like that. Like it's going to
Yeah,
be made
that's
out of like
different.
a,
But in most places you
but most
can.
places. Okay. So McDonald's, you
Yeah,
travel and you're like, all right, we got to go to a
yeah,
McDonald's.
yeah. Like when I'm in Africa, I go to like KFC a lot. They don't really have McDonald's apart from a few countries, but there's like KFC everywhere.
I am
So
so shocked by your answer, but so I get it. I understand. I so if I ever come to visit with you and we're traveling around, that's what I could expect. You're like, all right, got this fancy restaurant, the Mickey D's, right? That's where we're going. Awesome. Well, if you come to Florida, I'll take you out to a steakhouse or something. I'm not taking you to McDonald's. I refuse. So awesome, Maurice. What question during this interview should I have asked you? We'll go through how people could connect with you and all that other stuff later. But business or personal or whatever, what question should I have asked you that you'd like to talk about here on this interview that I didn't
Yeah,
ask?
like I think that like people should really ask themselves, are they feeling comfortable having all of their assets in the United States? So I'm because there are a lot of people out there that say, oh, the dollar is going to be finished and the US is going to crash and all these like doomsday people. Like that's not the mentality at all. The thing is, you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket, and you just want to think carefully about this. When you have everything in the US, you're very dependent on what your federal government in terms of local policies and international policies, et cetera, and the Fed. So having a portion of your assets outside of the jurisdiction of the United States is probably a safe move, actually. It's actually very safe. So I'm not necessarily promising bigger returns than you would by using a whole bunch of leverage and buying like condos in the Midwest or something. But what you have is true diversification. It's possible to buy market real estate in markets where interest rates don't actually have an impact on real estate, where real estate is actually a real asset. Because in the US, people like to think, oh, real estate, I can touch it, it's a real asset. But I mean, if interest rates go to 10%, watch what happens to that to that class. It's real estate has become in a lot of Western countries, it's the same in Western Europe. It's become a part real asset for sure, but also part financial asset. But you can go to markets like Colombia where you can get rental yields of 10% and where interest rates changes don't impact the housing market because interest rates are already high.
Mm, wow.
And it's like, you know, cash returns. You put, boom, the money, you have a nice apartment. You can go spend some time there yourself. It can get you even a residency in Colombia if you want to plan to be there. And you make decent returns. And there are a lot of countries in Europe also that can get you residency.
Super cool. So let's get to this point where we go. If someone wants to connect, follow you, follow your blog, join your email list, maybe even do an international deal with you. What's a good place for people to connect you, follow you, and go for that?
Sure. Thank you, Josh. So the best way is to go onto thewanderinginvestor.com. So that's my website. You'll see there's a bunch of articles on international real estate, on residencies, etc. And there's a mailing list. It's called the private list. It's entirely free. So just put your email, your name, and then you'll get updates as I travel around the world looking at investment and immigration opportunities. And I'm also on YouTube. But the bulk of my analysis is really just the mailing list.
Yeah. Now, super cool. Do you, man, how do you deal? Gosh, I got so many questions about this. We might have to do another one. How do you do with when you're filling out like tax reporting and structures and like your own LLC, family off? Like, how do you set up your thing? That's this last question I'll ask you.
There's no straight answer to this.
Okay.
Every deal is different.
Yeah.
Every deal is different.
Got so many questions. We'll just have to do another one, Mr. Maurice, or Ladislas, which is super cool name, by the way. I like it.
Thank you.
And I said it correctly?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, I did it. I'm just, my name's super boring, Josh. But Maurice, thanks for coming on the show today. Fellow deal makers, as always, reach out to our guests and say thanks for being on the show. Tell them you heard them on the Deal Scout. If you're looking at international travel, international deal making, investing in emerging markets, foreign markets, as always, follow what our guests are doing. The goal of this show, mission of the show, is to put deals and deal makers together. So if you're interested in investing outside of home, take a look at what the wandering investor is doing. Maybe get some tips and tricks and have a chat with them. If you're working on a deal and want to talk about it here on the show, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, get you on the show next. Till then, talk to you all on the next episode. See you guys.